Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Haunt Collection Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Codina, and you may have noticed that this episode is a few days late at this point. If you follow the social media, the links are in the description below the video. You'll have seen that I announced that I was going to be a little late for a few different reasons. I didn't specify what, so I'll specify what those reasons were here. I said there was good and bad reasons. The good reason is basically Monster Hunter World. I have never played a Monster Hunter game before, and I decided to pick this one up, and I am absolutely, completely hooked on just invading this new world and destroying the local ecosystem by, just murdering large creatures so that I may make clothing and weapons for myself and my little anthropomorphic cat friend. Really, the bad reason and the bigger reason is I had a health thing. Nothing too serious, but a health thing. If you're not interested, it's not going to get too gross, I don't think, but maybe a little. But if you're not interested, you can feel free to skip ahead a bit. I'm not going to get into too much, but essentially what happened was I have a hernia. I've had it for a few years now, an umbilical hernia. It's basically on my navel, my belly button. Probably because I've been an overweight guy for a long time, and my job is physical labor and stuff like that. So probably a combination of those things. Mostly my weight, I'm sure. I developed an umbilical hernia on my stomach a few years ago. I just kind of noticed it, and when I went to the doctors, he said not to worry about it unless it started hurting and all that. And it's never been a problem. Last week, very strange. It was out of the blue. I wasn't lifting anything or anything like that. Basically, I woke up and I have like a little bump where the hernia is, and I kind of noticed that it wasn't there, which I thought was strange. And as I was like kind of getting ready to go work out and all that, I felt it. It started off like kind of faint, but it grew real quick. It basically felt like someone had reached into my stomach, or, my abdominal area, and just grabbed a fistful of my intestines and just started to squeeze as hard as they possibly could. I turned into a complete baby. I was in the worst pain that I've ever felt. I've been pretty lucky with my health in my life. I should say that, especially that I've never been the most physically fit person. But health wise, I've been pretty lucky. But this is the worst pain I've ever felt. I kind of had to force myself to get dressed and all that, but there was no way. It was either someone had to come get me or I had to call an ambulance, which I didn't want to do. So I had to call my uncle to come get me because he was the closest one. At least I thought. He was actually out running an errand. I had to call my uncle. He ended up picking up my mom on the way, and they took me to the emergency room. And I was fully prepared to be like, okay, something happened. Like, I know that, like, hernias, they can get, like, knotted up or, like, caught or whatever. And then basically that means, you need emergency surgery right now because everything is all, like I said, it's caught. So it's strangulated hernia is what it's called. Like, it's losing blood flow because it gets caught in the tear of the muscles or whatever. Like, it pops out. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the emergency room. They're going to bring me back. They're going to say prepping for surgery or whatever. Okay, so this is the slightly gross part. Fortunately, the ER was relatively empty. There was like one person ahead of me that needed to check in. So I got checked in. They took me right away. And I went into a room. And the doctor comes in and, I explain to him best as I can what's going on. And he kind of looks and he's like, oh yeah, your hernia just popped out. He's like, so we can push it back in. So sparing you the details, he pushed my hernia back in, which wasn't pleasant. But yeah, that was a thing. So I was relatively fine afterwards. But at some point, I do need to have surgery because now that this has happened, it can and will happen again, and the risk is increased of the bad thing happening, the strangulated hernia. So at some point, I have to go get this taken care of. I just have to begin the process and sort out some stuff. But yeah, so that's why I've been late. I don't want to say I've been recovering. I've just sort of been like being extra careful with it and stuff like that. It's although yesterday, which would have been Sunday, I thought like it was feeling kind of weird. Although at this point I think it was the muscle and not the actual like the intestines or anything. Nothing dangerous basically. I think it was like feeling strained, but I was worried about it because otherwise I would have recorded and kind of gotten it out yesterday. But yeah, so that's what's been going on. And if you planned on skipping ahead, this is the point where you stop. Because I will. It's about all the updates I have. So let's look at the story for this week. I went ahead and took this one from No Sleep. It's like kind of like I usually do. I went and looked at what the top has been, like top rated stories from the last month, and I picked up one that it has 3,095 upvotes, and it was posted 28 days ago from this date, so almost a month. And it is a story called Anglerfish by Reddit user Coffin Stuffer. I don't know anything about it. I just kind of picked it out because I thought the title was interesting and the length seemed appropriate. So without further ado, let's jump into Anglerfish. Coyotes will sometimes lure domestic dogs out into the woods by playing with them. A single coyote will approach the dog, ears forward, tail up, acting friendly as can be. It may even roll on its back and expose its belly in a show of submission to draw the dog into a bout of mock wrestling. Gradually, the games will push further and farther away from home, deep into the forest. That's when the rest of the pack appears, clusters. The dog's new friend becomes its executioner as the pack begins to attack. Oh, that's sad. I love dogs. I have a dog. He's great. He's a miniature schnauzer. He's adorable. But, that's sad. Anyways, we'll see. It's an interesting introduction because it seems like that's sort of like a prologue. Like, kind of, obviously the title of the story is Anglerfish, and it's, starts with this sort of, It sounds plausible. I don't know if it's true or not, and I'm not going to Google at the moment if coyotes actually try to lure dogs out into the woods away from home. I've definitely heard of coyote attacks on dogs, but it's what it's been. But yeah, it sounds plausible enough, even if it's not true. But yeah, obviously it's talking about, something luring prey by acting friendly, so I assume that ties in with the Anglerfish title. But yeah, it looks like it jumps into the actual story here, so let's see how it goes. It's not uncommon for lonely children to bond with imaginary companions. They invent invisible friends to pass the hours away with. It is considered a typically harmless behavior, as long as the child understands the ultimate difference between fantasy and reality. I've often wondered about the correlation between invisible childhood friends and later mental disturbance. I wonder what the statistics of suicides and disappearances might look like when juxtaposed against the incidence of imaginary friends and what age someone stops seeing them. The first invisible friend I can remember was named Kevin. He was a little boy just like me, if not a few years older. We used to play together on the beaches of Lake Michigan, building sandcastles, collecting rocks, and splashing around in the water. Kevin liked to swim a lot more than I did. He'd dog paddle up far into the water, giggling and urging me to join him. I tried a few times, but whenever I swam more than 10 feet from the shore, my mother would call me back. Kevin and I played together almost every week, from my early childhood until I was 9, and my family moved farther inland. I didn't even realize that Kevin wasn't a corporeal person until years later. I made some offhand comment to my mother about my old lakeside companion. She seemed confused and said there were never any other children when we went to the lake. I would laugh and talk to myself, but there was no Kevin, at least, not that she ever saw. Okay, so, again, we have an instance where it seems like our narrator was kind of being lured out by this friend into the water. Come out into the water, he says he would sell him. Yeah, so it seems like something about this, there's something that's trying to lure our narrator out into the water, and it took the appearance of a friendly child that they would play together when they were by the beach, and he would try to lure him into the water, but fortunately his mother was there to stop him. Interesting concept that it seems like it's kind of getting at that maybe, it's not over yet, but I'm just kind of speculating on where this is going to go. Maybe it's something like invisible friends aren't just imaginary, that there is something that lures people to their death and all that. Like it says, it wants to see the statistics of mental disturbance and suicides and disappearances and all that, compared to people who have imaginary friends. And so, yeah, it definitely seems like it's kind of hinting that maybe people with imaginary friends are in some kind of danger. Children with imaginary friends are in some kind of danger because they might not be just a figment of their imagination. So it's an interesting concept. I'm curious to see where exactly it goes. It looks like it's going to talk about another instance in nature of animals luring prey. Hyenas can mimic human laughter. There's a lot of African folklore about evil spirits that can imitate the voices of loved ones to draw you away from the village. These stories might have been fairy tales, but they served a very real purpose. The people who survived are the ones who didn't follow strange sounds in the dark. I like that. Like, out of context of the story, I just sort of like that little blurb. That's something that's up my alley. The folklore thing and all that, and the people that survived were the ones that were wise enough not to follow the human sounding laughter. And like I said, it talks about there was evil spirits that can imitate voices and all that. When, at least in the context of this blurb, it's kind of saying that it wasn't evil spirits, it was hyenas, and people would go to look because they would think the hyena sound was human laughter, and they would get torn apart by these vicious animals. But yeah, I just in that context, I like that, and I'm kind of liking the structure here so far. There's this occurrence in nature, and this is my story. This occurrence in nature, this is the story. It's interesting. It's obviously it's a little more trying to be a little more than the sort of creepypasta. Hey, here's my story. This weird thing happened to me. That's fine. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's continue on and see where it goes. I met Polly a few weeks ago after my family moved into a new house in an area with dense forests and narrow roads. Rural Michigan might as well be the Canadian tundra. We were farther north than Toronto. Though the summers were pleasant enough, the winters got bitter cold. I don't know for a fact that I was the only one who could see Polly, because she only had come around when I was alone. But once or twice, she seemed to disappear into thin air, which makes me think she wasn't made of flesh and blood. Polly was weird. She made me nervous from the second she walked out of the woods. Maybe it was her bare, dirt-covered feet, or her wide, glassy eyes. Even at 10 years old, I knew the other children weren't supposed to just appear like that. She shouldn't have been wandering around in the middle of nowhere without an adult. She always wore the same thing, a faded floral dress, with her straw-colored hair in 2 messy braids. She never offered any explanation of where she came from, or where her family lived, beyond just pointing back into the woods. She said they didn't live that far. They had a cabin out there. I didn't believe her. Interesting. So again, we have, did it mention, okay, so this is a few weeks after they moved, and, yeah, okay, so this is like, this is sort of right after, Kevin, the boy by the beach. This is a few weeks after he meets another girl out in rural Michigan. But yeah, that's out in rural Michigan and all that. So, still a strange place to kind of randomly meet strangers. And he's suspicious. And he says flat out that she disappears sometimes. Or that she would disappear sometimes. Obviously, a red flag. And keeps on. It seems like she's going to attempt to lure him out in the woods. Although our narrator isn't buying it. Yeah, let's just continue. There's not too much to say on that one. Let's see where this little section goes. But I was bored. No other children lived within walking distance, so Polly and I would kick a soccer ball around and climb trees and play cowboys and pirates. Cowboys and pirates. I don't know if the two ever met. It would be interesting, though. She always wanted me to come to her house. She said she had a lot of fun games there, but I wasn't allowed to leave the yard. Polly was predictable, at least. She was always waiting for me after school, regardless of the weather. When it got too cold out, we played up in my attic. I was alarmed by her lack of boots or winter clothing at first, but she always just shrugged and said the temperature didn't bother her. She did try to get me to come outside with her sometimes. She'd say I didn't really need a coat either. She said that if you stayed in the snow long enough, you'd stop feeling it. At the time, I wasn't certain she was trying to harm me. She was confused, lonely, and desperate for a friend. But at the back of my mind, a nagging voice told me she didn't have my best interests at heart. So I never did follow her out into the elements without proper protection. I in a way, I kind of like the voice of this, the sort of just matter of fact, nothing, it's just kind of just telling you what happened. There's no, he isn't describing really these huge, great moments of fear and stuff like that. It's just sort of, she told him, well, if you're in the snow long enough, you don't gotta worry about it. Which is, it's creepy because obviously, the reason you stop feeling it is because you go numb and die. And so it's creepy. I like that. So far, it's interesting. I'm curious to see where this is going to go because, it's obvious to us that something is trying to lure our narrator out, to his apparent death. But I'm curious if we'll find out what exactly it is. Or if we'll get an inkling. There's another break here, to talk about something in folklore. I just kind of want to keep going on this and see where it goes. Let's continue. Sirens are an ancient idea, creatures that take the shape of gorgeous women or whatever their prey would find most enticing. Creatures that sing so beautifully they can bewitch any listener. Creatures that are such effective predators, their prey doesn't notice their trap until their ship has been dashed to bits on a rocky shore and there's blood in the water. Okay, simple enough. We know the tale of the sirens leading sailors to their deaths. It goes to let's go back to our narrator here. Let's take a look. My family moved just a little outside Detroit when I was about 13. I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories about what the city is like, what a ghost town it is. I've even heard it compared to a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But you have to understand, it was a pretty gradual descent from the 60s until about 2000. In the early 90s, it wasn't in the terrible state it is now. My parents and I moved into a relatively nice apartment complex. I went to the nearby middle school, and it was fine. I didn't make friends very fast, but I also wasn't scared for my life or anything. Robert introduced himself a few days after we finished unpacking our boxes. He was 15, a tall, skinny black kid with a buzzed head and a 1,000-watt smile. He said he lived down in one of the basement units, though I never saw it. His father drank a lot and didn't like company. We would sometimes hang out at my place, but it was kind of cramped. My mother was usually home, so Robert and I spent a lot of time on the roof of the building. It was terribly exciting. I remember the way my heart used to skip and flutter when we stole cigarettes from the corner store, or slipped a 40 into our baggy jeans. On cool autumn nights, when Robert and I would lie back on a blanket and look at the stars, my skin would get inexplicably warm. I'd feel strange and fuzzy all over, and it was more than just a watery beer. He talked to me a lot about how he wanted to be a pilot. He'd always dreamed of joining the Air Force. His dad said it was a stupid idea. There's a word here coming up that's not so nice. It's a bit of a homophobic slur. So just a warning for that one. They don't let faggots in the army. I never heard that word before. Faggot. It felt heavy and dirty, and also thrilling in the same way that everything about Robert was. When he cut my face in his wide hands and pressed our lips together, it was like the hormonal floodgates burst open, and I was suddenly hungry in ways I've never expected. It's an interesting turn that this took. Assuming that Robert is, whatever this is that's luring our narrator, trying to lure him to his doom, that instead of being just like a playmate, it's taking a sort of romantic angle, and not just a romantic angle, a homosexual romantic angle, which is I didn't see coming. It's interesting, and it obviously doesn't seem like our narrator minded it. So I'm going to see where this goes, but yeah, let me finish this section real quick and see where it goes first. I started to suspect Robert was not real when I saw him fall 9 stories into a dumpster below and get up again without so much as a scratch on him. I decided to ignore all better judgment because I wanted to keep kissing him. We only lived in that Detroit apartment for about 8 months. By the end, I was well and truly in love, and when Robert whispered that there was a way we could stay together, I almost listened. But I didn't want to step off the roof. I was scared. I knew it would hurt. When I refused, Robert became despondent and disappeared. I didn't see him at all the last 3 days I spent in that building. Yeah, that's interesting that it isn't, it wasn't just like, okay, this is one of his buddies, and hey, let's do this cool thing, watch this, I can do it, and you'll be fine. I was fine. But that, it played on romantic feelings, and it almost seems like, it's tough to say, maybe I'm just sort of kind of pulling this out of there where it isn't there, but maybe the thing or whatever, like, kind of knew something about our narrator that, like, our narrator didn't even realize. Like, that was the first time our narrator mentioned being attracted to Robert, and he even said that he had never heard that slur, the F word, and all that, which might be the least believable thing in the story so far, that you've never heard that slur at, 15 years old, I guess he's supposed to be. But, whatever, I guess. But yeah, I didn't get the impression that our narrator knew he was attracted to the same sex at all. In any way. There was really no reason to bring it up before this, but, like, even, like, in this paragraph about Robert, like, there was no mention that, he was an attractive boy, and all that, and then it just sort of comes up because Robert kisses him, and, and he likes it, and that's kind of how the creature uses him to tempt him. Like, it kind of fits in with the siren, like it said, these were beautiful women that lured them in, played upon the lust of people and all that to lure them to their doom. And that's kind of what it did here. Instead of, being playful, it kind of, it played on as, the hormones of a young teenager, which is an interesting turn. I kind of appreciate that it went there with that. Yeah. And then, of course, like we saw, our narrator moves again. I'm curious why he moves so much, but he moves again, and he moves around a lot. Like, I don't remember where it said where he lived when he was by the beach, and then he went up to rural North Michigan, and now he's in Detroit. Obviously, it's not in the realm of possibility. I'm just kind of like, why do you keep moving in these like short spans of time? But yeah, it's interesting so far. I think I'm liking this story. Let's see where it goes. We have another break here. Versions of skinwalkers and shapeshifters appear in most cultures. It's a terrifying idea, being hurt by something that looks like a friend, danger that seems harmless, wolves in sheep's clothing. I can't help but wonder if something as old as humanity itself might be the thing these legends sprang from. Perhaps from these stories are warnings of some primal memory. A creature that looks like a person, but absolutely isn't. Well, a little callback to our story last week, Ananti's Goatman story, the shape-shifting creature of Native American lore, apparently. Kind of speaks for itself, right? There's, most cultures have some kind of shape-shifting creature in their folklore, and he's kind of just pondering, where did these things come from? Is there some kind of central being that this idea of a shape-shifting creature that looks human but no way is, comes from? And continuing with our narrator. After my parents split up, my mother and I went to Ohio. She had a sister there, just a short drive from Columbus. We all lived together in a trailer, along with my 5-year-old cousin, Becca. I was 16 by then, so I was often left to watch Becca after school and on weekends. I didn't mind it too much. It wasn't like I had other friends. She'd fill in her coloring books while I did homework, then we'd go outside. There was another little girl next door, Tess. She and Becca loved to run around together, racing up and down the dirt roads, playing tag. Whenever they'd go too far off, too close to the parkway for comfort, I'd call them back. Becca usually listened, but Tess always seemed reluctant. I didn't think a whole lot of it. One day, when I was a little too engrossed in reading a comic book and not watching the girls closely, I heard a shriek. "Tess, watch out!" I looked up just in time to see a semi-truck blasting past, not even slowing down as it ran little Tess right over. My jaw dropped. Panic shot through me. Sure, she wasn't my kid, and I hadn't been directly tasked with watching her, but this was still ostensibly my fault. I was on my feet, ready to run to Mr. Calhoun's house to borrow his phone and call the police. But Tess was still standing there, completely unharmed. She skipped off the road, giggling and whispering into Becca's ear. Becca still looked a bit shell-shocked, but smiled, and hugged Tess close. My stomach twisted. It was terrible to see from the outside. One of those things trying to get my baby cousin. When I got close enough, I grabbed Becca's wrist and tugged her away. Tess eyed me, cold and calculating, unlike any of them had ever looked at me before. Perhaps I'd gotten too old. The whimsical thinking of childhood had given way to suspicion and fear. Perhaps I could tell that I'd caught on to the game. Perhaps I was angry I could even still see it. Most people my age couldn't. "You leave Becca alone," I said firm as my cracking pubescent voice could muster. "Or what?" Tess smiled at me. I'd never noticed how sharp her canines were, how mean those overgrown dirty fingernails looked. I hadn't taken the time to get a really good look at her until that moment. "I'll hurt you." "Adam!" Becca began trying to struggle out of my grasp, obviously embarrassed. Tess had started to back away, still smiling. She probably knew I couldn't do anything to her, but maybe I'd get someone who could. A priest or a rabbi or something. "Becca," I kneeled down to be at her eye level. "Look at me. Tess isn't real, okay? People can't get run over by a truck and live." "Let me go," Becca wailed, pushing at my hand ineffectually, trying to squirm free. "Becca, please. It's important. You can't play by the road with Tess anymore. She wants to hurt you. Becca broke down into ugly tears, face bright red, windpipes constricting to form unholy shrieks. I sighed, picked her up, and carried her back to the trailer. She cried herself out and fell asleep on the couch. When her mother got home that night, I told her Becca was playing way too close to the road and wouldn't listen when I said it was dangerous. I hoped that was enough to warrant keeping her inside for a while. It wasn't more than a few weeks before Becca stopped talking about Tess. When I asked, she said that Tess had gone away. I took comfort in the fact that I hadn't seen her around either. Yeah, interesting. So, it seems like our creature has moved on from Sam. We heard right? It was Sam, right? Or Adam. Sorry, I don't know where I got Sam from, but yeah, Adam, our narrator, and is moved on to his young cousin, and which is again, it's kind of an interesting turn where like he's still seeing it even though he shouldn't be, and we have creepy little kid syndrome, of course, but it's not too bad. Really not at all too bad. She doesn't like say too much. Like she doesn't say too much of creepy things. She's just sort of like, acts weird. And I like the description of like he just happens to notice that her canines are sharper than they should be, and I especially like that the mean, overgrown, dirty fingernails. Like, I like that detail. Because it doesn't say, like, flat out, like, oh, like, she had little claws or something. It's just sort of, like, her fingernails were dirty, and they were kind of overgrown and mean-looking. I like that description. I like the way Coffin Suffer, the author, went about it. Yeah. I really just kind of want to push on. Yeah, we're almost done. So let me just push on, maybe. We have another break, and then there's another short bit to finish. Because at this point, like, yeah, I'm liking the story, and I'm afraid of that it's going to kind of drop at the end. But we'll see. Let's see. Anglerfish are grotesque creatures. Ugly, with long fangs and dull eyes. But in the depths of oceanic trenches, they can hide in the shadows. The only visible part of them is the glowing ball of light that sprouts from an antenna at the top of their head. They advertise salvation, the only source of illumination in the pits of despair. But any creature that takes the bait meets a sticky end. So yeah, we have our description of our eponymous animal, the anglerfish, which, if you've never seen it, you should Google image it. It is a very interesting creature. I'm sure you probably have seen what one looks like, but yeah, deep sea creatures are odd looking. That's a thing we know. A lot of them are, they're kind of, stuff with nightmares often. A lot of stuff with long teeth and, strange anatomy because, the pressure's different down there, light is different down there and all that. And, anglerfish are no different. They are, kind of biggish fish, like big and like, they have like big mouths and sharp teeth and long teeth. And they have this little antenna that sticks out. And there's a little light, bioluminescence that glows at the end. And it'll kind of bob it up and down just to lure in prey. Because it's like, it's that little light lures in, creatures and stuff, and once something gets too close, chomp. That's it. Yeah, like I said, I'm sure people knew that, but just in case, that's obviously that's the point of the story is something that lures things in with the promise of potentially something good or interesting, only to eat them. So yeah, let's finish this one up. I still see them every now and then. Little old ladies begging for help across a busy street, right when the light is about to change. Pretty strangers at bars who are far too aggressive in urging me to have another drink. Lonely hitchhikers that ask to travel to places the GPS will never find. But don't worry, they know the way. I'm not sure what they are. I can't be the only one who notices them. After all, most of us had the ability at one point. We just grew out of it. Perhaps we shed it. Perhaps we shed it as a survival mechanism. Perhaps I'm one in a million. A kid who got stuck with a genetic allele that should have been bred out generations ago. Perhaps my existence is purposeful, and I'm a new evolution when it comes to defending ourselves against the strange and bitter unknown. I can only say one thing for sure. Keep a close eye on your children when they start to tell you about their new invisible friend. Chances are that friend is not friendly at all. And there's a link here. I'm curious what this link is. It links to, I assume this is the actual author's website. It links to a taylorputorti.com, and it's just, it's a site, and it looks like it has stories and recording and stuff on here. Yeah. So that's interesting. So I'm curious. He's kind of advertised it, I guess. I don't know why he linked to this specifically, unless I don't know. So whatever. I guess I see Anglerfish is on here. So yeah, this is I think it's just advertising his site, which might be interesting. There's might be some things on there I may take a look at. I'll check his Reddit page and see if there's more, because I liked this. I liked that nothing really gruesome happened. There was just kind of like this existence of there's imaginary friends are not imaginary or friends. There's these kind of creatures that for whatever reason are trying to lure people to do something that harm themselves. And of course, earlier we had the pondering that maybe that's where disappearances and some suicides and stuff like that come from, is because they were tempted into it by these beings that only the people can see. It's an interesting take. Like I said, I like the voice of it. I like the structure of it. I like the kind of speculating on why Adam, our narrator, can still see them. There's some good little details in it too, some creepy little details. Like I said, the little girl's fingernails and stuff like that. The hitchhikers that want to go places that GPS won't be able to find, and this is pretty well done, pretty well put together story. That I think it didn't have the strongest of horror, because we kind of knew what was going on, and I don't think a lot of tension got built. But I think it's just kind of like a cool, here's a creepy concept like type thing. And it works for me. I like it enough, for sure. It's enough to say that yes, I like this story. And I'm curious to read more from this author. But yeah, I kind of think that like the little breaks with the nature facts and the folklore facts. I feel like the first couple were a little bit stronger. The coyotes and the hyenas, in the way they're put together, it seemed maybe this just kind of looking for criticism, not really. And I feel like kind of the rest were just sort of like, I need to talk about something shape-shifting and all that. Or something that lures things in. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have much in the way of critiques. Or bad things to say about it. Like I said, it isn't the strongest horror. This isn't one that maybe it will, but I didn't really get a lot of chills from this. But like I said, there's definitely some creepy stuff that happens in here, and the idea is a nice little spook. The whole thing. It's more like in a way, it's and to a lesser extent, I kind of feel about this like how I feel about the new It movie, where as far as the horror, it kind of fell short of what it could have been, but like storytelling wise and character wise, and like concept wise, strong. I was thinking about doing like a review of it. Maybe I still will one of these days because I have a lot of thoughts about it. I have to watch it. I watched it when the Blu-ray came out recently, but I'd have to watch it again. I should have done it when the movie came out, or I don't think I had started. I had recorded, but I hadn't like actually launched the podcast when the movie came out. But I thought about doing so, and the book was still like fresh in my mind because I had listened to it. That was it last summer? Yeah, I think it was last summer. I listened to it. But yeah, so like it was still like the comparison was kind of fresh. But yeah, maybe I will do that one day if people would be interested in me doing movie reviews. But yeah, back to Anglerfish. Yeah, there's, like I said, maybe not necessarily the best horror, but definitely some strong concepts and a good way of storytelling. Like I said, I really I like that the creature tried to appeal to our narrator's sexuality and sexual urges and stuff like that, and not just tried to be friendly, but actually went that far with it. It was like interesting character development, and like I said, like I was kind of saying that it was sort of like our narrator kind of came to terms with him being gay, like because of this creature. Although it doesn't really say that. That was just sort of like how I was interpreting it, which kind of like if that's the way it is, that in itself is creepy, right? Like this thing that ultimately wants to kill you is kind of opens your eyes to what what you are and all that, like, to your, how you truly feel about things and all that. And you almost die because like this new thing that like you're kind of this new discovery of what you are, kind of learning yourself and all that. Just to keep doing it, it wants you to kill yourself. Basically, it wants you to throw yourself off a building. Yeah, that was interesting. That might have been my favorite part of the story because it felt very genuine, and it was like this sort of slice of life in the middle of the story. If it wasn't like that whole, if you took out the the supernatural, this what was it? Robert was the boy's name. Like this whole thing, like he's actually a kind of weird creature that's trying to tempt him into murdering himself. Like that story is kind of it's an interesting slice of life of kind of two teenage boys meeting each other and kind of like learning things as they go along. Yeah, that was an interesting piece, and I appreciated the that it was there because it kind of made us. We weren't getting a lot about Adam, our narrator. It was just sort of, okay, when I was a kid, I had this little friend, and then when I was a kid, I had this little friend. And then we kind of get a little bit more about him. Like, he started feeling a little bit more like a character here. And then it kind of builds up afterwards where he's kind of standing up to these things for his cousin and all that. Like, he just kind of has this acceptance that he knows what these are. And that maybe he even be meant for, greater things and stuff like that in a way. Or that he might be something greater, like an evolutionary thing, that he can still see these things and understand what they are and all that. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here. I like it. Like I said, maybe not the strongest as far as horror goes, but maybe I say that because like I never really had imaginary friends. I believe my brother did, but I never did. I had action figures, and that was just kind of like enough for my imagination, I guess. I never had them, and so like maybe I don't relate quite as much with this one to have that horror, but yeah, like either way, I think this is a pretty solid one, and I liked it, and I'm glad I sort of just picked this one out randomly. And we'll see. Maybe we'll read more of his Taylor Putorti coffin stuffer stuff, because I like this one. So wouldn't mind checking out more and see what else he can do. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up. Right? Yeah, I think so. So yeah, thanks for listening. Always, of course. Thank you. Sorry about the delay. Like I said, it was a health thing. I don't like being late, but it is what it is. Yeah, hopefully I should be on time for the next episode on Sunday, like usual. So yeah, that's about it. Later.